Hello and welcome back to AP Psychology. I'm Miss Lee and we're still in Unit 7. This video will be focusing on the trait theory of personality. By the end of this video, you should be able to describe and compare research methods that psychologists use to investigate personality. This will include case studies, surveys, and personality inventories. You will be able to compare and contrast trait theories of personality with other theories of personality, and we're going to be looking specifically at the contributions of key researchers, including Paul Costa and Robert McCrae. You should be able to identify frequently used assessment strategies and evaluate relative test quality based on reliability and validity of the instrument, and this is going to focus on the personality inventories. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and grab your notes and let's get started. A few basics of trait theory here. First of all, a trait is considered to be a tendency to respond in a certain way in many different kinds of situations. So it's basically what people kind of expect you to do in any given situation. Trait theorists believe that every trait applies to all people and that the trait can be measured. Trait theorists also look for connections between an individual's behaviors, often asking what behaviors go together, so they're looking for connections. Let's start out with Gordon Alport. He was one of the first trait theorists to describe personality in terms of fundamental traits or characteristic patterns of behavior or dispositions to feel or act in a certain way. He identified three main types of traits. These are cardinal traits, central traits, and secondary traits. A cardinal trait is a characteristic or feature so important that the person is identified by it. So an example of that would be like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol is stingy and cold-hearted. So it's really kind of the defining factor of who and what Scrooge is and represents. A central trait is a trait that makes us predictable in most situations. For example, she's a flirt, or he's shy, or that person's really outgoing, or that person's extroverted, or that person is funny. So these are central traits that people are kind of known by. And secondary traits are the least important of the three, but they convey our preferences to items such as music or food. So you like disco music, you like coffee, wait, that's me. So you like a certain type of music or a certain type of food. Another important researcher in trait theory is Raymond Cattell, and Cattell used statistics or factor analysis and identified 16 personality factors that he believed made up the building blocks of each individual's personality. Basically, what he said was that everyone has the same 16 characteristics, just to varying degrees, and it was those degrees that kind of made us who we are. Isaac and Isaac, they believe that there are two basic dimensions of personality rated on a continuum, whether someone is extroverted or introverted. And here are some kind of accompanying characteristics of a person's personality, whether they are extroverted or introverted. And then someone's emotional stability, whether they are stable or unstable, also determined what type of characteristics that person displayed. Someone who is considered to be emotionally unstable, this factor was known as being neurotic, or the opposite was emotionally stable. And then you had, again, the introverted or extroverted characteristics. If you look at the graphic to the right of your screen, you will see that in between the poles of the two factors, whether it's introversion, extroversion, or emotionally unstable, stable, you have these dimensions. There's choleric, sanguine, phlegmatic, and melancholic. So if someone is emotionally unstable but extroverted, they would display these types of choleric behaviors or personality traits. So the person could be touchy, restless, aggressive, excitable, changeable, impulsive, optimistic, or active. And then you've got, again, the person who is both extroverted and emotionally stable. That person would be social, outgoing, talkative, responsive, easygoing, lively, carefree, and display leadership. Phlegmatic, I think, is kind of interesting because the root word is phlegm, which is kind of characterized by slow acting, kind of predictable, maybe even a little annoying. So you've got passive, careful, thoughtful, peaceful, controlled, reliable, even-tempered, and calm. And then the melancholic or melancholy, someone who's displaying this type of behavioral characteristic would be moody, anxious, rigid, sober, pessimistic, reserved, unsocial, and quiet. These were the personality factors that were proposed by Eysenck and Eysenck. Next, we get to the Big Five. This is a set of slightly expanded factors. This theory is currently considered the best approximation of basic trait dimensions. The Big Five theory is not by any one of the theorists, but a compilation of the work of many, and is the most accepted trait theory in psychology right now. The traits are rated on a continuum scale. So here are the basic Big Five traits. We have emotional stability. You will notice that some of these traits are borrowed directly from previous trait theorists. Emotional stability identifies individuals who experience things relatively easily and without getting upset. The opposite is neuroticism. This is being constantly angry or worried and complaining all the time. This person tends to look for the bad rather than the good in situations. Extroversion, which is associated with warmth, talkativeness, and being energetic. The opposite is introversion, being quiet, shy, and cautious. Agreeableness involves being sympathetic, cooperative, kind, trusting, and good-natured. The opposite is antagonistic, being abrasive, irritable, suspicious, and jealous. The next is openness to experience. This describes people who are open-minded and willing to try intellectual experiences, new ideas, or creative experiences. The opposite is resistant to new experiences, being predictable, conforming, and unimaginative. The last of the Big Five is conscientiousness. This identifies individuals who are dutiful, dedicated to completing tasks, organized, and responsible. So the opposite is impulsiveness, which includes tendencies such as carelessness, giving up easily, and being irresponsible. When we're talking about assessing the Big Five, you have to first talk about Costa and McRae. They created the revised Neo-Personality Inventory, or Neo-PIR, a psychological personality inventory with 240 questions that measure the five-factor model, or the Big Five traits. Personality inventories are used to assess traits. They're questionnaires on which people respond to a wide variety of items which cover feelings and behaviors. Most notably different from the projective test because there are clear questions and answers, and there is a key to determine meaning from the inventory. So it's not subjective, it is objective. The most used and researched inventory is the MMPI-2, or the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. This was developed to identify abnormal personality tendencies, and it is again scored objectively, but it's important to remember that objectivity does not equal validity because some people have learned how to fool this test. As we're finishing up our discussion on this theory of personality, it's important to look at criticisms of the theory. Criticisms include the question, do our traits determine our behavior in every situation of life? Traits do appear to remain constant over the lifetime and across situations like shyness. However, our behaviors can and do change. People do not always act in predictable manners in all situations, although one's average personality as a whole is pretty predictable. And that is it for the trait theory of personality. In our next video, we'll be discussing the social cognitive theory of personality. I can't wait to see you then. Bye for now.